So, the last major island in the Ionian chain. I can feel Kythera giving me major side-eye. Look, go and play with your little brother, okay? Ask him if he's got any new mechanisms to show you. As you might have gathered, we did this straight after the few days we had in Kefalonia. There's a ferry that runs between the islands, but it's kind of underplayed by both islands, which is odd for a major transport link. You can't even book in advance. We did try. It leaves from Posada Port. Posada Port is a piece of concrete at the end of a road. Yeah, that's it. It didn't have a sign anywhere saying, "Oh, hey, how's it going? This is Posada Port. Yeah, you can cross the sea here. Pretty cool, huh?" We had to get a cab there, as even though there are 3 buses there daily, none of them actually leave in time to get to the Zakynthos ferry, or in fact, within 3 kilometres of the actual ferry port. No, really. So basically everyone either drove there or got a cab. Posada is convenient for approximately 0% of the island. Anyway, a guy appears and starts holding court at a lectern, selling the tickets, and we get on, off we go. It's a pretty smooth crossing, it's about an hour and a half. The northern coast of Zakynthos slowly drifted into view, and we got a look at the rugged coast of the Shinari Cape. We'll be back there soon, but it makes for pretty impressive views with the tall cliffs and the caves along the way. So we pulled into Ionian Islands, which is on the northern tip of Zakynthos, and a bit like on Kefalonia, how the buses didn't think that the port was worth connecting to. Well, Zakynthos buses used to connect to Ionian Islands, but not any longer. Or maybe, look, I know, I'm doing it again. I promised last time I'd cut down the bus talk, but this one is kind of significant. After looking through websites of various vintages, trying to find correct bus info for Zakynthos, I eventually gave up and just tried emailing them. And I was told that there are 2 buses that go there, but they're not on the timetable, printed or digital, so they really don't seem that keen for you to use the ferry. I don't know why. Ionian Islands is a bit of a one-horse town, to say the least. It at least seems to acknowledge the existence of human beings, unlike Posada. And, there's cafes, they're all right to chill in for a bit, but can I counsel you against booking your stay there? There is a tiny beach, and, it's not horrible. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend basing yourself there. It's frankly weird that it gets the 3rd degree from the Zakynthos transport network, because it's something of a hub for boat trips, in particular, Navagio. Let's talk about this for a second. So Zakynthos will not get a mention without the image of Navagio Beach, colloquially known as Shipwreck Beach. It will be used to sell all sorts of holidays. I've even seen advertising locations that aren't in Greece. It has become something of a shorthand image for hot holiday, and it is probably only slightly less ubiquitous than that blue dome image of Santorini that is everywhere. Now, of course, that's just the tour operators, right? No. When you land on Zakynthos, there is an almost hysteria, a sort of near religious obsession with the iconography of Shipwreck Beach. It might as well be a place of worship, the amount of devotion that seems to be attached to it. Now, since we were in Ionian Islands and a large volume of boat tours leave from there, it seemed like the most logical thing to go while we were there. So, boat ride to Navagio. We don't really have beaches like this in England, but there is no way to access Shipwreck Beach from land. When you see it, you'll understand why. At their lowest, the cliffs are about 30 metres high minimum, and short of installing a glass elevator or base jumping, it's just not happening. So we sped around the Shinari Cape, and after a longer ride than I expected, we glimpsed the beach. So, okay, it's pretty impressive, but it is pretty busy. My normal instinct with these blogs is to try and frame out people as much as I'm able, but I decided to leave the people in here so you get more of a picture of what it's really like to be there. And yeah, if I sound a bit cagey already, I'll be honest, I was not expecting much from Shipwreck Beach itself because, yeah, it's pretty common knowledge that this is essentially a tourist trap. Now, no big surprise, this is a place to worship yourself, a natural basilica to the Instagram age, but less flattering aspects of the human race aside. This is the titular shipwreck. It's not exactly a romantic Portuguese galleon, it's some rusting industrial metal hull from the 1980s. It's a cool feature. You're told not to use it as a climbing frame when you arrive, but people do anyways, no surprise there. The one thing you absolutely will not get there is peace and quiet. It's not just the people, but all the boats are sounding air horns like it's a rave in 1992. The larger boats were starting to pull out when we got there, but no real surprise, there were more behind them. So, bottom line, since I was expecting it to be crowded, I wasn't disappointed when it was, well, just like that. The water and the setting make it pretty special, even if you've got about 1,000 other people sharing a kind of limited space. The water is genuinely beautiful, I've got to give it that, at least. So yeah, not horrible, but I'm trying to downplay it so you don't make it the centre of some pilgrimage. Expect it to be just okay, and then there's room to be pleasantly surprised. Heading back, the cliffs on the northern edge are spectacular. It looks like they're just entire mountainsides that have slid into the water. The boat trip is actually a 2-parter because the second most popular location on Zakynthos is known as the Blue Caves. We had to join a short queue to slide into the caves. There's quite a number of boats from different tours all hitting the same point, so some genius decided the caves were really missing a big sign just so no one was in any doubt they were there.
Thanks, bro!
The highlight is the shot that makes it onto a lot of the posters alongside the images of Shipwreck Beach. It's the double sea arch that line up to make, it's quite a view. I'm not really happy with the shots I got. The contrasts are a bit sharp between the sunshine and shade, but it was nice to see in person. We were barely there a moment before moving on again, and back on land, we got a cab from Ioanian to Zakynthos Town, where we were staying. Not having much choice, all things considered. It cost about €45 and took about an hour. We haven't really done an overview of the island yet. Zakynthos is split into roughly two halves. The western coast is pretty much entirely mountains. It's them that form the impressive coastlines along the north. Then, quite without warning, the island drops down into this flat, fertile plain that fills up all the space till Zakynthos Town. Zakynthos Town is perched just below this rocky outcrop, and if you've watched any of my videos so far, you can probably guess what's sitting on top of there. It wouldn't happen to be... it's a Venetian fort. I mean, how could they resist a high rocky platform above a Greek port? But more on that later. Rather dozily, we decamped into our Airbnb. By the way, I've kind of stopped even bothering to film those, unless they're kind of especially of interest. It's fairly straightforward just to find your own. Then, still pretty dozy, we had our first wander around Zakynthos Town. Jen reckoned everything had a pronounced difference from Kefalonia. I wasn't quite feeling it yet. Zakynthos does seem a little bit more anglicised. It was subtle at first, hearing English colloquialisms thrown around more readily, an omnipresence of screens showing football, some people being excessively rude to a cashier at a frozen yoghurt store, and a few signs here and there. Zakynthos has a bit of a rep of being a stag, lads destination, but the main town itself is pretty chill. There's plenty of people, but apart from a few bars playing house just outside by the square, the clubs seem to have been pushed outside of the main city, which, makes sense. Okay, day 2. Got up in the morning and went and caught the sunrise, and that felt so good. Had a wander down the beach to the north of the town. I mean, it's not really a beach per se, but it's sort of trying to be. It's a bit derelict, which is sad. It has a lot of potential. When I went past this stretch another day, when it was sunny, there were a handful of people here and there swimming and enjoying themselves, and if you just demolished a few crumbling buildings, laid down some sand, it wouldn't really take much to turn the northern end of Zakynthos Town into a pretty chill beach spot. So what about the town? Well, I actually preferred it to Argassi. Argassi is pretty impressively tidy, but tidy is noticeably different to exciting. That said, Zakynthos Town isn't all that much of an attraction in of itself. There's a central square which has the echoes of its Venetian past, but sadly, the earthquake you keep hearing about in 1953 hit this place pretty badly as well. The former Venetian buildings that surrounded were all pretty damaged and rebuilt, and the sad thing is the archway is now pretty plain to the point of kind of bland. You can see from Corfu Town what this place would have looked like in its glory days. This church, at least, survived in its original form. Okay, I headed straight for Coffee Island, and it was closed. Okay, so instead I went to this place opposite, which was, still pretty great. So that morning we had a short walk on our hands. It was mildly cheaper to pick up our hire car from the office in Argassi, and that's about 45 minutes away on foot, so we decided we'd take the time to explore. So you head over a bridge and you get out of Zakynthos main town. Unfortunately, this stretch of the coast has been kind of left to rot. I mean, look, I know tourists have a bad habit of messing places up, but tourists don't tend to fly tips, so I think this one is a bit more of a local issue. Again, it wouldn't take much for this area to actually be quite nice. This stretch is where some of the clubs are, and as we got into Argassi, it was not looking promising. It's basically just one straight road lined with stuff, mostly tack, painfully gimmicky restaurants. It's kind of a bastardized theme park abstraction of what a completely ignorant Brit would think Greece is actually like. I mean, really, who likes this? Who comes here and says, "Whoa, love Greece, yeah, love a bit of culture, me"? Please, take it from me, you do not want to stay in Argassi. However, in amongst all the tourist detritus, there are a number of places hiring out mopeds, quad bikes, and more significantly, cars. We went with these guys. They're local, and more to the point, they don't insist on putting $1,000 on a credit card. The big global of hire companies all insist on these terrifyingly high deposits as standard. But do a search. Most destinations, there will be a local company who are just like, yep, we're not going to do that. Here's the price. For reference, this was about £70 for 2 days. Here's some insurance options, which again is only a few pounds, and then that's it, off you drive. So followers of the channel might have picked up this was actually a first for us. We normally link everything on the bus or public transport. My folks were able to sort of hire a car for Brittany, but we weren't the ones driving it. As far as this trip goes, we didn't really have much choice. You remember how I lamented that Kefalonia's bus service was very thin on the ground, even in the height of summer? Well, there's a Zakynthos bus service barely even tries to cover the whole island. It's basically just connections from Zakynthos Town to the resorts that form a crescent around the southeast. The rest of the island, including, like a major port, basically nothing. You have to sort your own transport out, which includes Navagio Beach. So let's stop and consider this. Here's this one location that is single-handedly responsible for goodness knows how many people coming to the island, and once you get there, it's at the opposite end of the island and you've got no way to get there on public transport. I mean, I know there's boat trips, but if you're talking about this image, as in if you want this view specifically, there's a location above the beach that is not accessible from the beach where you have to go to get this shot. Now, there are some taxi companies that will get you there for about 80 euros. Yeah, do you see how weird this is? All the hysteria, but no straightforward means to get to the one place everyone is trying to get to. So I didn't get much footage in the car on the first day, as I was helping Jen to get used to the roads. You know, your first time behind the wheel of a £7,000 accident waiting to happen is unnerving, to say the least. The centre of Argassi is a bit of a trial by fire, as there's parked cars, waiting coaches and pedestrians just in the road everywhere, so it was a little fraught. However, it helps there is a 50km/h speed limit on the entire island, so that eases you in. Before long, we were getting into the mountains. The roads were narrow, but there is at least a line down the middle, so that's something. So while we were still getting used to the petrol car, the right-hand drive, you know, different country, all that stuff, we aimed for somewhere not too far away. This is Damiano's cave. It's a little stop off just from the village of Argassi, about a 5-minute walk down the hill, and you're there. Considering the blackened walls, you can sort of see where the dragon myths came from. I don't think I've ever seen a 2-story cave before. For the first time in a week, the sun had gone behind the clouds, so not great for the colour while I'm trying to film, but you know, it was cooler at least. There's a cafe just by the entrance, and rather than just being some tourist trapped in a hut, this place was genuinely interesting. We were looking for something cheap, but even the toasty was presented nicely, and a sneaky espresso as well. Even though the weather wasn't really beach weather, we headed to the next spot up the coast, which has come quite highly recommended. This is Porto Limnionas. The roads were pretty skinny around there, but at least they were asphalt. Porto Limnionas is a bit of an oddity. You can quickly see from the water why people would flock there. It's a nice spot, but not a grain of sand to be had. It's just scrambling over on a rocky slope. Someone's been around with a cement mixer to try and make it a bit more accessible, but it's still pretty sketchy. And yeah, these planks were not very encouraging. So bring your flip-flops for this one. This would be really painful underfoot. We took a breather for a while. It's not the most user-friendly beach ever, but, you know, it's pretty, and if you're into jumping from a concrete block, then sure. The driving was proving stressful. Going through the small villages is a very tight fit. There's very few roads where you can really just relax into the driving. And to be honest, I wanted to wait for better weather for the big sights, so we headed into Zakynthos Town for a rest. Had a Fredo from Coffee Island. I only realised partway through, but they made the Fredo with whipped cream, which is like kind of moreish at the time, but then I felt pretty sick by the end, so that was weird. Usually Coffee Island was a pretty safe bet, so I'm not sure what happened there. We explored Zakynthos Town a little bit further. The pavements are... Okay, well, this isn't that uncommon in Greece, actually, but if you want to walk on the pavements, you might want to bring a machete, or maybe, you know, just walk in the road. There's always just stuff in the way. People's bikes, bins, mattresses, or just endless branches to duck under. It's not a big deal, but it is effort just to try and walk in a straight line down most streets outside of the absolute centre. What really cracked me up, I do not understand how, in an arcade, no one could decide on how high the pavement should be. It just goes up and down with every different shop front, so just, you know, watch your step as you go. How did this happen exactly? But even though these are pretty normal streets, this just really makes me happy. And this, it just feels so different from the UK, and it cheers me right up. We eventually stopped off at a restaurant by the water called Amos Tavern. It doesn't leap out, but it was pretty good. Lots of free stuff appeared, and the final bill was only like 25 euros. So consider this a solid recommend if you're in Zakynthos Town. Okay, day 3. We set off early. The roads were reassuringly quiet. The island is pretty in the early morning sun, and the theory was to hit the viewpoint early before the crowds really swamped in. So, okay, we pull up. There's a few cars in the car park that would be way too small at the peak of peak season. Bit of a river of litter leading from the car park. That's sad. Couple of souvenir/drinks vans parked up. I mean, I imagine there would be more on their way. It's funny, from all the pictures I'd seen, I could actually recognise the top of the cliff just by its shape. Now, officially, there's this viewing platform, but it's about 1 person wide and almost hilariously unfit for purpose. So, despite the sign telling you not to do this exact thing, very clearly everyone just heads to the right for a better view. The rocks underfoot are incredibly jagged and awkward to walk on. I mean, I thought all the hand-wringing about cliff edges was being overblown, but with a surface this difficult to walk on, it's not hard to picture someone putting a foot wrong, especially if there was a crowd there. As it turns out, you might need a wide-angle lens to fit the entire scoop of the cliff in. That is if you don't want to clip the tail off, but that's probably not chief amongst your concerns. After all the hype, what's it like actually being there? Well, I don't know, it was nice to see. Not exactly a quasi-religious glow. If this is a touristic place of worship, then the end of the cliff top there is the Holy of Holies. kind of like I was hinting at earlier, if you're going to go to a huge, expansive view, something special, feel free to take a picture or two of yourself or selves as a memento, but maybe, I don't know, don't try and make something clearly much bigger than yourself all about you. But, it's definitely worth seeing. I was really glad to have been, but it's made all the weirder by all the noise surrounding this one view. Anyway, despite having stood on the hallowed ground, we weren't exactly going to jump straight on a plane home. It was still only just after 10 in the morning. Just up from the viewpoint is the monastery of St. George Kremnon, which has a pretty impressive fortified tower in the courtyard. It's pretty impressive for a community of peace-loving monks anyway. The Navagio viewpoint is nearest a village called Anafronita. We stopped at a small cafe. Apparently the power was out in the village, but they still managed to boil some water for a Greek coffee, and I totally caved to this local cat and gave it some of my untoasted ham sandwich. It's not exactly a film set, but Anafronita does have a really warm, small village vibe, and the people there were genuinely lovely. There's another monastery just down the road, which, again, nice to poke your head around the door, and another fortified tower. It's not the first thing I associate with monasteries. Apparently the monastic orders in this part of the world have a bit of a military-industrial complex going. Now, the monasteries aren't really places to spend hours and hours, as you can probably see. But this is the funny thing about day 3. Whatever we did, we just really couldn't kill time. It was a strange problem to have. We had evening plans, but everything we tried to fill the day just seemed to take no time at all. We headed to Porto Vromi, as it was near. The drive there was nice, the mountain slopes dotted with caves. Porto Vromi itself is pretty small. The beach is diminutive, but it does have a small amount of sand at least. It seems like this is another place that boat trips launch from. Doubling back, as there's only one road in and out, we headed south a bit, and we thought we'd stop in on our evening plans to book a table, just in case. This is Porto Schiza. It's a restaurant with the most ridiculous view, and it came very highly recommended for an evening meal over the sunset. Again, the clouds were taking the edge off the view a little bit, but it was still barely after 12 o'clock and dinner wasn't for another 6 hours. So, okay, we figured we'd head further south. On our way, we passed through Ios Leon to get petrol, and there's this nice bell tower there, which was definitely worth a quick look. It's always refreshing to see the architecture that survived from pre-53. Day 3 was quickly turning into see the modest towers on the west coast day. We had a quick stop for lunch in Koliomenos because, well, this bell tower is just the coolest. So much so I took some horizontal video, which looks horrible in 16:9, but, well, who really cares? The villages that dot the spine of the west coast are a mixed bag. They're nice to glimpse. The sort of semi-ruined nature of some of them does add an extra romance, but there's little to make you stop and really explore. They're small places where people live, a couple of cafes in each, that's basically it. I feel really bad because to have all the rental cars and especially quad bikes roaring noisily through, it must disrupt any normal sense of village life in the summer, but the high season is only a few months wide, and the rest of the year this would be almost deserted. We ended up going the length of the island through a village called Ferry and down to a viewpoint that looked pretty cool, and whoa, okay, Google majorly undersold this one. But whoa, okay, not unlike Navagio, it was an unfenced edge and very loose earth there too. Did genuinely get nervous peering over the edge to try and get this rock fully in shot. This is Mizethres. I'm not doing so well with the pronunciation today. Yeah, something like that. You could see a few boats pulling up to chill there, but it was pretty quiet where we were, and it's quite a spectacular view. We had a couple of quad bikes sharp while we were there, but otherwise we pretty much had the space to ourselves. Headed back north, we stopped off in Exochora for a drink. They have an extremely old olive tree there. Some say about 1,500 years, some say 2,000. It's quite a gnarly, twisted thing, but, it's still growing, it still has green leaves. And a lazy walk later, and it was finally time to get to Porto Schiza for dinner. I'm still kind of amazed that a place like this exists at all. It's not the only sunset cafe on Zakynthos, there's kind of 2 more in this village alone, but the views you get. I couldn't help but wonder if early September had rolled the numbers down, or maybe because it's on the more remote west coast of the island, we managed to get pretty much one of the best tables you could. There were maybe about 15 arranged along the very edge, an actual fenced edge, which, considering the 100-foot drop, was definitely a welcome change from the rest of the day. And we took 2 hours to eat and drink slowly and watch the sun go down. It was a great evening. It was so peaceful. The food was very reasonably priced and tasty. It's not hyper gourmet, but I definitely couldn't find any fault with it. And the fact that most of the mains were under 10 euros, in a spot like this, you'd really expect to get gouged. So yeah, I will happily sing Porto Schiza's praises. The staff were all super chill and friendly. The food was inexpensive, but yeah, absolutely incredible. I can die happy now views. Even if you have to overpay for a cab there and back, or, I don't know, hitchhike or walk barefoot or whatever, get there. You will not regret it. Driving home in the dark was a bit of an experience, but hey, there's not many cars on the road, so that's cool. Next day, Up early, you know me. Zakynthos Town is angled perfectly for the morning sun in summer. Not so much sunset, but, sunrises are nice. I doubt you'll take my suggestion, but hey, it's your loss. So, we had to take the car hire back by 10, but there was one more place I wanted to see while we still had the flexibility to get around. So those mountains you can see from Zakynthos Town, well, they seemed like a nice place to head in the morning, and there was a little something I wanted to see about halfway up. So we drove through Argassi and found the beginning of a track up the slopes. The road was, it's kind of the bare minimum amount of flatness needed to actually get a car over it. But if you drive up it in first gear and about 5 miles an hour, you can gingerly get a car up there. Apparently the road gets worse nearer the summit, so we found a wide stretch of road about a quarter of the way up and walked the second half. It was so tranquil though. The beautiful mountains in the cool of the morning, which was rapidly turning into the heat of the morning. And hello views. Yeah, as far as views back of Zakynthos Town, I mean, you'd struggle to beat this. And maybe 2/3 up, oh, looky here, there's a Byzantine church. Oh, I wonder who left that there. Now, I've got to say the staff on the gate were a bit rude. Nah, I'm just playing. We cool. You guys almost had me there for a moment though. I mean, you'll already know whether you care about a ruined 11th century Byzantine church, but I mean, I liked it. Back down, we eased the car back onto the main road and dropped it back to Argassi. We were expecting something of a cross-examination, maybe a holding cell, but again, these guys, so delightfully chill, sort of glanced at the car for less than a second and were like, yeah, okay, whatever, and yeah, off we go. So, it's a little before 10 a.m. in the morning. Now that we're without a hire car, we had to catch a bus. Down the peninsula, there are several nice beaches. I like the look of this one. It's Port Azzurro, or Porto Zorro. I'm not sure. They seem to correspond more with the name of the bars than the beach itself. Whatever. It's pretty nice. After all the driving, Jen had asked for a chill day, so we grabbed a sun lounger and rested. Thing is, well, okay, you might have guessed this. I'm not great at doing nothing. Looking around the beach and wondering, is this like the standard holiday experience people expect? Just coming to somewhere like Zakynthos, sitting on the beach and doing nothing? Yeah, I gotta say, doing nothing is kind of a mish. I'm not a huge fan. The beach is nice, but by lunchtime, even Jen was feeling like moving on. No riveting footage at this point, but the bus was 45 minutes later than we were expecting. Yeah, look, I'd brushed off the reports of the headaches caused by Greek buses before this holiday, but we were getting a chance to experience it firsthand. Well, anyway, at least we managed to catch this one. The next one wasn't for another 3 hours. So back to town. Oh, and while we're about it, the Zakynthos bus station is in about the least useful place it could possibly be. Nowhere near the centre, not near anything at all. I mean, Argassi is one of the more significant routes. You'd think they could at least loop a little way into the town, but nope, you've got to walk. So, a longish trail through the town later. I rested a bit, wandered a bit, got some pickups I needed for this blog. I was wondering about jamming in a couple of other locations last minute, but the thought of having to navigate more errant buses put me off. This was the last full day, so just had a coffee here, rolled to the last day. This last location felt very 11th hour. Our flight was leaving at 12 o'clock, but this was actually the first time we'd found to fit this in. But it's open at 8 a.m, so we can do this in a hurry. Saw this booth on the way up pretending to be a statue. We really got very sweaty doing this, even at 8 a.m. The slope up and the sun, I mean, I shouldn't be so surprised. When do the Venetians do anything but put a fort at the top of a ridiculous incline? So this one is a bit strange, actually. Once you've gone through the front gate, oh, it's €4 in, by the way, but that's not unreasonable. I'm still amazed the Kefalonia ones were free. It's kind of like stepping into Narnia. I mean, fair to assume that the trees weren't there when the fort was still in full use. It's a pretty extensive site. A lot of it needed propping up, and yeah, thanks to all the earthquakes in this part of the world, the fort needed near constant rebuilding. We trudged down to the bus station, fretted that the airport bus wasn't going to show up, so it arrived 15 minutes late. Okay, no people get off, 3 people get on, and 2 of them are us. I'm just at a loss. Is everyone shelling out for a cab? Did anyone look into the bus, or did people just look at the location of the bus station and give up? Anyway, airport. Yep, busy, really busy. We breezed through security in no more than 20 minutes. Food is both unusually expensive and unusually bad, even by airport standards, so probably avoid that. We stood around, airport stuff, and then we were gone. Okay, so wrapping up. Well, Zakynthos is definitely a lot better than just a stag location. Get accommodation in Zakynthos Town and stay out of the resorts. We didn't even see Legamas or Alikes on the south of the island. They're supposed to be the most clubby places. That said, Zakynthos is a bit run down in a lot of ways. We went past a lot of rubbish piles that looked like they hadn't been collected in months. I mean, yeah, Greek austerity right now. It's really rough on the residents. Some of the abandoned houses were glorious ruins and some of it was just a bit shabby. I'll say that most of the shabby things were like the small details, the big stuff, the stuff that really matters. That was all pretty remarkable. And there's definitely some stuff we missed, all pressed together. We were only there for about 100 hours. Final thoughts. I am really split. Bottom line, I had a great time. It's not my favourite Greek location either, but that is a very tough category. The Greek holidays we've been on to Crete and Nafplio have been the high points of my entire life, so there's still no shame coming 4th or 5th. Next episode, we've got some unfinished business. We teased a little bit of an Albania side quest we took while we were on Corfu, so next time you can see what happened there. In the meantime, the music you've been hearing in the background comes from the EP that accompanies this series. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. Otherwise, we'll see you guys for the next episode. Have a good one.